Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with mental health advocate, artist, author, and podcaster Thomas Brown. When he's not writing, he loves to experiment with still and motion photography, as well as other mediums of storytelling. He hosts two mental health-specific podcasts. He lost his brother to suicide in 2001. After a decade of grief, uncertainty, and confusion, he decided he needed a change. In 2012, along with a friend who also lost a brother to suicide, he set out on a cross-country bicycle tour for suicide awareness and the healing power of art, along with writing a book. Dig this story.
We'll charge right into it. So it's great to meet you, Thomas.
It's great to meet you too.
So
how are you doing? Sorry, how you doing today?
Everything's great, man. Where are you located?
I am in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh man, Phoenix. I always hear good things about Phoenix. I've been through there. I'm in Kansas City. So
you're in Kansas City, right on. My kin come from Kansas. I got family. My dad was born in Derby. My mom was born in Wellington. I got family in Wichita. I have family. I used to have family in Lawrence. My great uncle was connected to KU basketball for a time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we almost went to the campus at KU yesterday. There was a minor league baseball team here, and we got rain real bad for a couple of days, so they had to literally not play at the stadium, and they went to KU to play there. And
right on.
Lawrence is a little ways away, but it's always fun. But well, cool, man. Yeah, you got seeds all over the place here in the Midwest. So
yeah.
We'll peel back the layers of all of that. But to begin our conversation, before we get into your life as an artist, an author, podcaster, mental health advocate, I want to know, 4 years ago, we were really looking at this pandemic, trying to figure out how long it was going to last, what was going to happen. Now that we're kind of out of it, so to speak, how did you survive it and how did it change you?
It's crazy. I had banked a bunch of vacation hours with my job. I work at a library in one of the municipalities in Phoenix, and I was like, all right, I could take this time to just work on my book. We never closed. Libraries were considered to be what was the term that they were using for like places essential services.
Yeah.
And people just think of a library as a place where people shush you and a place where you get books, but it's so much more than that. I kind of fell into the profession of libraryship on accident. I was still writing a book and I was always like a book nerd, but I never considered working at a library. And it was just by happenstance. Libraries are the last place you can go to in our society without the expectation of paying for things. So we get a wide variety of people from our society. We get young kids with their parents that are learning how to read. We get teenagers, somewhat angsty teenagers or studious teenagers. We get college students. We get professionals that are transitioning into different careers, and then we also get people that are experiencing homelessness. And among that population, there's a lot of people that are homeless that are dealing with mental illness. And so, even though we're not trained to be social workers, it's kind of that label has been thrown upon us. And the best that we can with what we have, and what we have is information or the know-how to collect that information. So we didn't shut down for a few weeks. All we had was a window service, a drive up. We had to put a lot of people on furlough, and then we would open a few days a week only because we put so many people on furlough that we didn't have the people power to keep the building open 7 days a week. So even on the days that we were closed, we still had some people in the building to work the windows. So not only that, but I have to say that I kind of thrived. I'm one of the very, very, very fortunate people who exists in the lower middle class economic range who actually thrived, because I ended up getting a promotion during that time. So I went from thinking that I was going to have time to finish my book to starting a completely different position, and becoming a supervisor and in charge of an entire department with 8 people under me, and trying to also navigate the anxieties and stresses of people that were, that were freaking out about this virus that was going around. Um, I didn't get to see my parents very much, even though they live like a few streets down from me. Um, my mom's not with us anymore. She passed away about a year ago from cancer. But my parents aren't the healthiest people, and I was going from like helping them with stuff a lot to having to navigate that. So I think more like in it was like a fear of what could happen to my parents and not trying to put them at risk because I was still serving the public in a large capacity. I don't know if that answered your question,
Yeah.
but it was just a really weird time for everybody. It made me realize that no matter what your profession, no matter what your status, it was kind of proof that like everybody's winging it. It doesn't matter if they're in high places of government or low places of government, like a city library. But everybody in their position kind of like is like winging it and faking it until they make it. And that was a scary realization to come to in the middle of that situation. But I came out unscathed. I did contract COVID at one time, but it was kind of like it was much further after the lockdowns, and I think I got it from a coworker.
It's interesting.
But
I think I got it early on. I got it in November, and I think I work in. I'm an IT technician for a school district, and I have a feeling it may have been somewhere along the way of going into a room, but it's hard to say. It could have happened anywhere. But it's funny when you mention libraries. My son's on the spectrum, and he loves the library, loves the staff, loves going in. And I remember those days. That was probably one of the more painful things that we couldn't physically go in there. Now we could drive through and get books and we could do it
you
all
broke out for a
remote. It
second.
was always available, but you're totally right. There is a level of being in a library that is social work. We're in there enough that I see the amount of people that come in that don't have access to technology or anything else. But it's also, I believe, one of the only aspects of what we would call like old school, old world that exists that's truly altruistic and fascinating to me. Like I still listen to audiobooks all the time. All my family, we get books all the time. We're very, very keyed in, and it's just a part of the fabric of being a taxpayer and being in this community. And it's so cool that that has stayed in place for all these years.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because libraries are under attack right now.
Yeah.
It's got sucked into the culture war. And the one thing that libraries always wanted to be was just a place that accepts all. Um, what is the thing that the people in library communities haven't really figured out yet was um the paradox of inclusion. Um, I forgot he's like a sociologist or psychologist that coined that phrase, but you can't be inclusive to inclusivity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to like draw a line at some point and not let wolves into the hen house. So it's supposed to be a safe place for everybody to have access to information that fits their experience in the world.
Yeah.
And I think from speaking from my experience, we do a really good job of separating what's for adults and what's for children. So, but we still get complaints even in the adult section
Yep.
of stuff that we have. So, but it's something that we're navigating and learning how to handle and knowing when to retreat from a battle and when to hold the line, um, you know, stubbornly.
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
and for a reason too, because we want people, especially people who don't feel that uh they don't feel accepted, to know that like, hey, in here, we got everybody's back, but we got your back too. You don't have
Yeah.
to be afraid to be here.
For sure. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. There's so much going on with your titles. If you were in front of a bunch of third graders at career day and one of the kids said, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I promote self-awareness. Would probably be uh, the number one thing. Um, and I even think that with that attributes to mental health, that attributes to being a creative, that definitely attributes to my book. Um, if you anybody who reads the book will find that for me and my personal philosophy is that one of the things that helped me navigate my mental health, the foundation was self-awareness. It's something that isn't cultivated in our society, at least not on an institutional level. And that is either done out of negligence or for nefarious reasons. Um, it's important for every human being on this planet to know who they are. And when it comes to self awareness, there's no finish line. You're going to change with experiences, especially traumatic experiences or jovial experiences, like where you hit like milestones in your life. But you're definitely going to change. But it's your responsibility to figure out who you are. Why do I feel the way that I feel? Why do I believe the things that I believe? Why do I react and respond to things in the way in which I do? And the reason why it's so important is because no matter how good you are at alienating people, you're stuck with you from cradle to grave. So you might as well have a really good relationship with that person. Um, Self-awareness is there's many levels to awareness. I think it begins with self-awareness, and then as soon as you start to get a hold of that and start to understand a little bit of who you are, it can expand into spatial awareness, my surroundings, my environment, the people that I cohabitate or coexist with, and then also that can transform into a social awareness, to be able to transcend beyond um, your own ego, your own perspective, your own state of mind. But it all begins with the self. Um, I had another point that I wanted to throw in there with self awareness. It's eluding me, so if it comes back, I'll bring it up.
Yeah,
But
well,
I do believe that self awareness is one of the most important aspects that every single human being um, needs to start a journey on, and I don't think that it is something that people pay much time to. It's easy to downshift into um, automatic and just glide and exist. But it's cultivating your own self awareness and being present within yourself and the situation, any situation that you find yourself in, is paramount.
so you as a creative and a writer and all of these and being a mental health advocate, take me back to where you were born and raised and how these seeds, these passions grew in and evolved into who you are.
Um, well, my parents are from Kansas. They got that Midwestern blood, that Midwestern hospitality. Um, but I was born and raised in Scottsdale, Arizona, a suburb of Phoenix. And Scottsdale has a reputation for being extremely privileged, and I will agree to that. But there are two Scottsdales. The older that I've gotten, there's a South Scottsdale and there's a North Scottsdale. And even though South Scottsdale has more privilege than a lot of the other communities in the valley here, we're nowhere near as privileged as North Scottsdale. And I'm a privileged person, but I'm not an extremely privileged person. Um, my brother dominated our household. It was very interesting. He had a very robust personality. My parents were simple people that came from a simpler time, um, and were too modest for their own good. They provided everything that we need for our survival. They gave us shelter, they put clothing on our backs, and they put food on the dinner table. Um, and I love them for that. But outside of that, you know, there was more of a domination for my brother as he got older. Um, he had his heart broken his second year of college. He was engaged to a woman, and they ended up breaking up, and it just devastated him. And he moved back home. I remember I was in seventh grade at the time, and he became a different person after that. He, men aren't allowed to feel this way. Men aren't allowed to feel sad. Men aren't allowed to feel broken. I'm never going to allow another woman to make me feel that way again. I will I will dominate every situation. And he just became a womanizer. Um, he was very charming. He had a really good singing voice. That was one of the things that he did. Extracurricular activities when he was in high school, and some of the stuff that he was doing while he was in college. So he was pretty smooth with the ladies in that regard. But it just got really weird because one of the women that he was with was my boss, became my boss. Like I'd known her before, but then when I started working for the city, in Parks and Recreation, she became my boss. And the other person that was his secondary girlfriend, or the second of his two primary girlfriends, because he had other conquests outside of those two, was somebody that I went to high school with and that I'd known since second grade. And so it just got really weird. Um, my parents, they just didn't know how to handle that kind of behavior. Um, and my brother was the type of person like, okay, now you need to be a part of my web of lies. And I was like, nah, that's cool. I don't really want to do that. And he's like, no, you're either going to like lie for me, or I'm going to make your life at work a living hell. Cause we both worked for the city in Parks and Rec. And after high school, I had started dabbling with some cannabis. I was really big into marijuana and experimenting with mind altering substances like psychedelics. And my brother would like try to use that against me. And I never did anything that would elicit me getting a drug test. So I was somewhat of a responsible drug user in my early 20s, if that's not irony in action. But my brother would use that against me. He would try to any way that he could use something against another person to control his world and to make sure that he was safe, he would do. So I was just like, I'm not gonna interact with you anymore. And I thought it was healthier for me. The first place that I moved into to this house with these two guys. Both of them were DJs at exotic clubs, so there was very much like a party lifestyle happening um, at my home, because our home was like the hangout place. And so I would like working after school programs in in the day, and then like live this party lifestyle in the evening. And to me, that was much healthier of an environment than being around my brother. So there was a lot of it wasn't even like it wasn't even like sibling rivalry. Like if anybody was rivaling, if anybody was competing, it was my brother. And I was just like, I don't want to deal with this. Um, so it was really weird for about 4 or 5 years after high school. I mean, my brother and I, when we grew up, like we were comic book nerds. He gave me his comic book collection. We were really into like Star Wars and sci-fi and movies. We would always talk about movies. But as I started to get older, and I was playing a lot of basketball, played basketball for my high school. Once I graduated from high school and all that that drama just started happening. The only time we ever communicated with each other is if we played basketball together, and it wasn't very nice. It was very aggressive. It was very mean. And even though he was older than me and bigger than me, um, I had I had a little bit more of a brute force for a lanky guy at that time. So I was able to keep up with him, and we would just bully each other and beat each other up. But that was the only time that I would really interact with him outside of like family get-togethers. So when what really changed is when the two women finally got smart, and they were finally just sick of all of his his deceit, and they both broke up with him at the same time. And because my brother never properly dealt with the first breakup that crushed his heart, he never went to therapy. This is like in like, the early 90s and then into like the mid and late 90s. He never really dealt with any of that stuff. So when they broke up with him, I think it was like early 2001, he freaked out. He completely freaked out, started losing weight. He was crying all the time. And he couldn't admit to his friends that he was depressed, because like you just don't do that. Men don't do that. Men don't get depressed. He just wouldn't do it. So and he was so masterful at his lies. Having two primary girlfriends for close to a decade, that he just told everybody he had cancer, and that's why he was losing weight. He never let anybody come to a doctor's appointment with him, never let anybody go with him to like a chemo appointment. There was never there was never any tells, especially looking back after just the last year, the last 4 months before my mom died. She was diagnosed with cancer, and there was a lot of physical tells with bruising and stuff, especially with like needles, that you would see from her getting her treatments. And my brother didn't have any of that, and I was just like a naive, like 24-year-old I was lost before, with the situation. I didn't have any like self-awareness. I was filled with anxiety all the time, and I was completely uncertain of myself. But when my brother started like saying that he had cancer and that he was sick, we did come together a little bit before he finally died. I remember one night, he was totally against me smoking weed for the longest time, and that one night we sat down together and we shared a joint, and then we watched Empire Strikes Back, and I just remember like how awestruck he was. It was like he saw it for the first time, and that was like a kind of a sweet moment that we had together. Like a few months later, he took his life. So the way in which he took his life was or the situation or the experience that I had in that was weird. I used to be a really big woo-woo spiritual person. I much rather focus on self-awareness and what's happening around me. Um, I don't scoff at spirituality. I may scoff at some trends, but I don't scoff at the mystery of the universe and of life. And so when I talk about the experience that I had when my brother died, um, it's still really weird for me. So being the music snob that my brother was, he loved a cappella and plays and musicals and operas and all of that. There was one Metallica song that he really liked, and that was Nothing Else Matters. I think it was a Monday or Tuesday morning, August 20th, 2001. I woke up. I was living. The guys that I had lived with, we'd calmed down in our party life. We lived way outside of the scene where we were at, and one of my roommates, Pete, um, his girlfriend was pregnant, so they were preparing to actually like start a family, and all of us lived together, and it was much more subdued. Although like we still would smoke weed from time to time. Well, not from time to time. It was a daily routine. So I get up in the morning on August 20th, and I do my normal thing. I go to my other roommate, Rich, and I sit in his room, and we share a morning bong, and then I go on and I stretch. And I did that every single morning. It was like I would, do a little wake and bake, and then go and I would do like meditation and I would stretch my body and get ready for the day. And I just remember I started to feel like uneasiness. I couldn't tell which way was up and which way was down. I started to sweat. I was getting super nauseous. I didn't know what was going on. And at that time, Rich didn't have a car. I would drive him to work. And then from work, I would usually go to the gym, or I would hang out with my brother before I went and started my shift in the late afternoon. And I just didn't feel good. So when it was time to take Rich to work, this is, I was like, hey, you're gonna have to drive. I'll sit in the passenger seat and I'll figure out how to get to my parents' house to hang out with my brother once we drop you off. And as we're driving down the freeway, Rich notices our other roommate Pete hailing us from his truck. He's like flying down the road trying to catch up with us, honking his horn, flashing his lights. And as soon as Rich says, Pete's behind us, the song Nothing Else Matters comes on the radio, and my nausea is gone, the sweat stops, and I just become completely like back in my body, like completely grounded. And I just look at Rich and I was like, something's wrong with my brother. And so we pull over to the side. Pete gets out of the car and says, Thomas, you got to go to the social services department near your parents' house. You have a family emergency. I'll take Rich to work. And so Rich, I'd known Rich like since I was in first grade, and he knew my brother too. And he just looked at me. He's like, call me as soon as you know what's going on. I love you, man. I'll talk to you later. And I got in the car. I was probably like 2 exits away from where that social services building was, and was actually connected to the rec center that I was working at the time. And I asked my supervisor if they had seen my parents. He had no idea what I was talking about. I went to go call my dad, and then he walks up behind me crying and just tells me that my brother's gone. And I looked at him and I was like, I know. But at that point, I didn't know how he died.
Yeah.
And because it was a suicide, all suicides are considered a homicide until an investigation. So my parents and I were at the social services where we were, all three of us, my mom, my dad, and I, were all individually interviewed while police were going through my parents' house where my brother had shot himself, where my mom had found him. So that was something that was extra difficult, because when we came home, like, they didn't cut into mattresses or couches, but every single cabinet door was open. Every drawer was still open. There were piles of paper that were all over the place. It's August, and it's late August. It's super hot. By the time we get into the house, they threw the dog. They didn't even let my parents take the dogs with them, so the dogs are just outside without any water. It just was one of the most callous things to walk into after dealing with a family tragedy.
Hopefully this gives people flavor of who you are. And I know that his suicide and you dealing with that and your journey has been woven into that. So if anyone wants to get your book, if they want to reach out, see your work, any of the good business, where can they go?
Yeah, if you go to risephoenix.org, that is the banner in which we rode the bicycle, our bike tour for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. Risephoenix.org, you can get to all the social media accounts, and there's also a link to our book. The book is called 2012, A Bicycle Odyssey, a 7,000-mile bicycle journey for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. You can purchase that up on Amazon, but there is a link on our website. And if you go to our Instagram from our website, it's _rise_philosophy. There's a link tree in there that gets you not only to the book, but to the podcast channel that I have on Spotify and Apple, where I have a couple different rotating shows that I work on periodically.
Excellent. Thomas, this has been wonderful. And as we've kind of established here, there's a lot to this story. We scratched the surface. So I urge everyone to get out and get your book, listen to the podcasts, and delve into your world further. So thank you for giving us a little glimpse. I appreciate your time today, man.
Hey, I appreciate you. I'm long-winded, so
It's all good, man.
I apologize for that.
No, it's all good. I appreciate it, and best of luck with everything. Keep doing the good work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.